Alrighty, so episode 3. Thanks everybody for joining. We got I Burn My CD, myself, and TTC from TurtleTurtle.club, a brand new pool that's taken over the scene. So thanks everybody for joining us today. And I know this is kind of soon since the last time we posted an episode about the coin burn, but we got kind of some overwhelming responses and a lot of questions, so we figured we'd push out another update. So I believe we have some V2 dev status updates, I kind of fucked that one up. But yeah, we have some V2 dev status updates.
Totally calling you out on the stutter on that one there, buddy.
Yeah, that's my fault. I'm looking at my list here and I'm realizing I'm like, well, if I just run through this, it's going to look kind of dry. Anyway, I guess we can just get started with the V2 dev status updates and then go from there.
For sure. That probably makes the most sense. So we've got a couple of questions that have come up a couple of times, obviously in the chat and across the Reddit threads, where people are looking for what the latest status is on the V2 development. And that largely comes from the fact that today the repo for V2 is private. And the reason that it's private and why we're keeping things a little bit close to the chest right now is because of the experience that we've had with forkers in the past, as I think we've mentioned previously. So where we're at today with it right now, we've already started framing up the underlying database system that stores the blockchain locally on disk. So far, we've chosen to use LMDB for that. I believe we've been told before, and Rock, keep me honest here, that LMDB is the best that it's ever going to be and the best that we're ever going to get. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's effectively done. HYC did a really good job on it, and it's been serving other chains well, and it looks like it's going to work for us pretty well too. It's pretty much purpose-built for what it's going to be doing.
True, and it's from what I've seen so far working with it, it's a key value storage system. So it's kind of similar to Redis in that regard, if anybody's used that before, and kind of similar, in all honesty, to RocksDB that we rely on primarily today. But we've been working on framing out what that structure and schema looks like in LMDB, and ultimately building out some of those structures that are saved to disk.
And what this means to you guys is that little folder, that ever-expanding folder hidden in your hard drive somewhere, and you keep wondering, where the hell is all the space going? Well, this is optimizations directly relating to that.
Absolutely. One of the things that we kind of learned going through the V1 code base is that there's a lot of data stored in that database. And some of that stuff is, believe it or not, just empty keys, which isn't exactly the best use of space. And some of the structures are kind of after the fact, I guess you could say, in the V1 code base. Nothing that we necessarily put together, but it's just one of those things that carried over from the forknote code base, right? The original implementation via Bytecoin.
Yep.
So we're basically reinventing that, like we've talked about before, and reinventing that schema going into V2, trying to be smarter about how we're storing data in that database to ultimately try to keep the files as small as possible. So, it all circles back to the transaction sizes, the transaction structures, the block structures, and the sizes of those. But it's also the underlying database that deserves a lot of attention there to try to make the best use of the space that people give us.
That seems like something that gets quite a bit of use, but not enough attention. I know that in the beginning, RocksDB was just kind of like a general install with regard to TurtleCoin V1. There wasn't necessarily a whole lot of optimization going on, and there was a lot of, I guess you could say, whittling along the way that it took to get it really, I guess, kind of humming like an actual truck engine or something like that, where it's just able to idle and do fine. Whereas before it was, a lot of sputtering and a lot of issues.
Yeah, I remember a time when all of us basically stood around a campfire, so to speak, and said, RocksDB, this pile of flaming shit, right? And we would do anything to rip it out of there. But once we kind of started kicking the wheels a little bit and figuring out, hey, look, maybe this isn't exactly tuned to how we need to use it or tweaked, we found that there was a lot of knobs there that could be twisted and turned to help stabilize things.
Yeah,
ultimately,
I was going to say a lot of that came from just reading the documentation that we hadn't really done a whole lot of before. RocksDB has pretty good documentation, and there were some little things in there that we had, I guess, either passed up before or neglected to acknowledge that were really relevant to our case.
Are you telling me that you didn't read the fucking manual?
I may be saying that. I might be. I might not. I'm going to give you the Glomar response on that one. I can neither confirm nor deny.
I get it. I mean, it took quite a bit of effort for us to kind of dive into that and take a look around and figure out where those performance hits were at, until it got relatively stable. But we're looking to kind of avoid that, right?
Yeah. I was going to say it wasn't all one update either. It was like a series of updates. I think Rashid had something to do with that. A lot of people had something to do with that. ZPalm, you.
Yep, and Yami Monster.
Yami, yeah, he used to come in and scream at us.
He did. That was probably, one of my first instances of seeing hands on hips, that were serious, that had some merit behind it.
But if I recall correctly, it came with some good pointers and maybe even a pull request here or there. I know he has the core developer tag, and I think that was like the first time getting a PR at gunpoint.
This is very, very true. It was actually funny. His name just crossed my mind when I was digging through the repo the other day and came across a couple of his commits. I'm like, oh man, I haven't seen him for a while. And I thought I saw him light up in the chat not too long ago.
Yeah. So tell us about the P2P. I think that was another one that we had on the V2 dev status updates.
Sure. So the peer-to-peer network side of things, we've talked about kind of reinventing that, practically as long as I've been involved in the project, if you remember. Some of the first outlines that I put together were for the Turtle-to-Turtle protocol, right?
I remember that. That's still in meta.
It is. It still is in meta. And, that was based on... Damn it, now I'm forgetting what it's called. That's how much I hate it now. The Google spec, proto buffs. That's it. Took me a second there, but it was largely based on that. And, once we kind of dug into once I kind of dug into how the protocol works today in V1, the binary message packing actually isn't that bad. And a lot of that stuff kind of digging into it, which largely allowed me to build a lot of the utilities for TurtleCoin utils. It's the TypeScript JavaScript package, right? And ultimately build out some additional functionality there. It led me down a path that, hey, look, we can do this binary serialization and handle that just fine. However, as we approach V2, we've got some underlying issues in that we want to support, not only IPv4, but we also want to support IPv6. Have all that NAT pinholing and allow the peer-to-peer connections to flow easily, and ultimately be able to build that mesh network that interconnects all the nodes, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Put a pause on that for a second. A lot of little buzzwords and things like that just came out here, and a lot of people are probably what the fucking in silence over there. So what we're talking about whenever we say things like NAT and pinholing and stuff like that, whenever you're running your TurtleCoin daemon and you're syncing for what feels like 5 years, what you're doing in the background is you're talking to other nodes that are on the network. And whenever they're trying to speak back to you or whenever they're trying to get in touch with you, if you're behind like a router or, some other network setup that is using network address translation, it's not as easy to get in touch with you. And so what we're trying to do is kind of reconfigure the way that the nodes talk to each other so that they can have more direct means of being able to speak to each other whenever they're behind a few steps that may otherwise complicate things. Is that pretty much the gist of it at a explain like I'm 5 level?
Yeah, that's pretty close. It ultimately comes down to kind of popping open the firewall, for lack of better words. And I say pop it open not in the sense that, hey, look, it's free reign, but you're absolutely right. There's got to be a way for users to dial back to your node, make sure that the nodes are interconnected at the network level, right?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right with how you explained that. And that was excellent.
Well, it's like, I was thinking about it the other day, actually. I was vacationing and I was in the mountains. And I realized that in the mountains, it's really hard to get a cell signal. And I was trying to get in touch with somebody. And it very much felt kind of like trying to penetrate NAT. Kind of a poor analogy. And I now that I kind of say it, it really, I don't know, doesn't really have a whole lot of relevance to it. But it was something that brought it to mind not too long ago.
Fair enough. And there's that comes into play with a lot of networking applications. I mean, so if you've ever ran a home game server before for whatever game it is that you're playing, you may have had to pop open a port forward right through your router to your desktop machine or your gaming rig or whatever it may be. This is the same type of idea, but let's face it, that's not always easy for people to do. And we know that we want to try to make things easy, right?
Yep.
So some of the things that I've kind of started to build out so far is helping to define the actual messages or the language, so to speak, that goes across the wire when the nodes talk to each other. And that was kind of built out and roughed out quite a while ago. It was, last summer, last fall, when I spun up that P2P bot?
Yep. And we were working on Rock's P2P, like the early beginnings of the P2P protocol implementation.
Yep, and I prototyped it up in Node, Node.js, and Rock here started prototyping stuff up in Go, right? Yep. And we got them talking together. So at least we know that the message payloads make sense and that they're able to communicate and exchange data, with the data structures that we've done. And we know that it's cross-language capable.
That's one thing that I hope that we see more in V2 is less of a singular core code base and more implementations in different languages. That way, and maybe this is a poor way of putting it, but a little bit more competition or maybe a little bit more collaboration. C++ is great and Go is great and they do a lot of good things, but it's always a plus to see more of a distributed choice of distributions that you can choose to gain access to the network. Other larger networks like Ethereum, Bitcoin, they all have multiple core implementations. And in my own opinion, I think that makes the community and the dev ecosystem a little bit healthier. How do you feel about that?
I agree, and that's been some of the goals, as I talked about, I think maybe the last podcast or the episode before that, and really kind of keep the code as clean as possible, right? And well documented and easy to follow. Because if I build it out in C++, right, and you see the structures and you see the logic flow, it's pretty easy then for somebody to come along and build an implementation that matches. So even from the standpoint of the networking side, yeah, the documents, that have been pulled together so far for that messaging protocol, it's relatively straightforward. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I wrote it and then you read through quite a bit of it, right? And did your implementation in Go.
Based off of your documentation, I was able to build something that worked. So given that I can do it, I like to say that I'm a shitty programmer a lot, but I'm all right, and I think that there's a lot of other people out there that have that same amount of potential. And I think that they could make it work too, regardless of what language it's in. But not Python, Lychee.
Oh, for God's sakes, anything but Python.
Lychee, you fuck.
Yeah, but to that end, like I said, it's the documentation aspect is going to be key to having those additional implementations. And I'm all for it. I'm excited at the idea of somebody coming along and building another node in Go, or they want to take a crack at it in Rust, or God forbid they want to do it in Visual Basic. That they could do it if they wanted to, and that's kind of exciting to think about, because everybody's going to have their different take. They can run a different database system underneath. They can run a different network library or whatever it is that they want to do there, or they can put their little tweaks on it, without necessarily having to go and push in C++ or learn C++, which let's admit it, it's great, but it definitely has a learning curve to it.
Yeah, it's not the easiest, and there's also different specs of C++. They're not all equal, and there's lots of different styles developing. Some people may use Boost for everything, and some people might not.
Fuck Boost.
How do you
I'll
feel
just
about
make that clear?
How do you feel about Lodash?
It's quickly climbing up into the fuck Boost category.
Yeah. I figured after last week with getting Dependabotted to death, I figured you'd probably feel differently about it.
You know, in all honesty, and you got to remember that Lodash is not a direct dependency of anything that I put together. It's always something else, like a linter, right? You know, or a formatter to help clean up my mess. But come on, node developers, get your shit together. Lodash is Boost, okay? And everybody knows that Boost served a purpose for a time, but we're past that point. I mean, just quit it.
Standard library or die.
Pretty much. And that's, you know, to that point, you know, a lot of the work that I've done in the V2 repo so far on the code base, it's all built on the standard library, you know, aside from some libraries that I pull in because reinventing the wheel isn't smart. But even those libraries that I'm pulling in are, you know, they're tried and true libraries that are bundling up functionality that's still built on the standard library, right? You know, it may call system specific headers for different platforms, but you know, why should I go through and rebuild an entire database system when obviously LMDB could work? Or why would I go diving into a network stack and then have to deal with the intricacies of the different platforms and the V4 and the V6 addresses and all that connection stuff when there's already libraries that are well built, well tested, and easily supported to handle that stuff?
So you're saying libraries or die?
I'm saying carefully selected libraries or die.
I'm just giving you shit, man.
Come on, we gave ourselves like, you know, a year to pull this off, and the timer's ticking here. I ain't got time to rebuild everything that is not part of the core technology from scratch, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. So one thing that was kind of new to me, at least in the P2P stack, and I'm no P2P god over here or anything, was the variant compression on the numbers. That was the first time I'd ever seen that, and it was the source of many days' headaches. Why don't you tell me a little bit, one more time, one more again, how variant compression works?
Well, first off, it's not compression; it's encoding. Let's get that nomenclature out of the way. All right.
Actually,
oh, I got no rebuttal other than yeah, okay.
All right. Well, anyway, let's hear it about your variant encoding.
Anyways, you know, the whole point of variant encoding is to save space on the wire. So when we think about something like a uint32 or a 32-bit number, we know that it's going to take 32 bits on the wire. It's straightforward, right? But that's a waste of bytes that are transferred or bits that are transferred on the wire if we have a value that, say, is 7, right? 7 out of the number space for uint32 just is a total waste of space. I mean, we're wasting 3 bytes in that case to be able to store that and send that. So what Varint tries to do, and it does it very well, I shouldn't say tries, but what Varint does is it encodes that 32-bit value down into the smallest number of bytes that it can use to represent that number. So even if that number is halfway between, you know, 0 and the maximum value for uint32, it will not represent it as, you know, 4 bytes as normal, and instead chop it down to maybe 2 or 3 bytes. Does this play a major role in what we're doing? Yeah, people could argue, you know, and if I recall correctly, you did argue with me. You're like, what the hell difference does this make, right?
I'm in a completely different camp right now.
Well, I'm glad that you're in a different camp because it all comes down to saving size, right?
Yeah.
It all cuts down on the storage requirements. It cuts down on the time, the bandwidth required to send transactions and blocks back and forth.
Yep, and it also gives you, you know, a little bit more wiggle room to you know, send more messages. It's great. You know, it's less congestion.
Yep, and we use var-in encoding today in V1, you know, and that's one of those things that when we take a look at binary serialization or serializing data to binary directly to bytes, that made sense to bring over with us, so to speak, right? It saves space, like I said, and ultimately it's pretty easy. It allows us to pack a uint64 clear down into just the number of bytes required instead of requiring 8. I mean, we can go even further and varant pack or varant encode, right? you went 160 or 128, 164s, 128s or 256s. I mean, the sky's the limit. It just continues to roll over.
The other cool thing is the offsets.
You lost me there, bud.
Okay, so whenever you were telling me about varants and everything like that, and you're basically unpacking them, you get the value and then you get the offset to read the next message.
Correct. I mean, when you read it, it's a byte stream in essence. So you get a stream of bytes that come through from the wire or from a file or whatever it may be, and you don't know how long that variant is going to be. The way that the encoding works is it looks specifically for a value to exceed, or the upper bit to be set on the byte in essence. And when it stops seeing that upper bit set, or that most significant bit set, I should say, then it knows that there's no more number coming, or there's no more parts of the number coming. So it's able to tell what that offset is, or how many numbers or how many bytes it read to get to that point, which then allows us to continue to read that byte stream for the next field that's in play, right?
For me, that was the cool part, because you could take a large stream of seemingly random data and intelligently chop it up and deconstruct it into coherent messages or fragments of a message.
Exactly. I mean, that was pretty much what unlocked it for me, was the same eureka moment, when I was going through and building the TurtleCoin util stuff and all the different parsing that comes into play for transactions and blocks and everything else in between, including some of the message payloads on the peer-to-peer side of things. That's what was the key to it, because nothing was making sense, or parts of it were making sense until kind of diving into that variant stuff and going, hey, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked it. So what do you have on the horizon for P2P? What's the next development?
So probably the next thing on the list here, as I continue to kind of hook things up, is that at this point, I'm probably going to rely largely on 0MQ for the actual networking library, because there's so much built in there and allows you to easily hook up hub and spoke messaging and one-to-one messaging and things like that'll make building out the network very easy. And not only that, but it supports V4, it supports IPv6 as well, straight out of the box. It's well documented, it's a pretty good library, and it allows me to skip building all that networking code while still getting a lot of the advantages of all that work that's already done without reinventing that wheel.
Yeah. 0MQ is pretty good. I've used it in some other projects. I kind of like it.
It's definitely kind of cool. I'm impressed so far with what I've seen, and then ultimately it's just building our protocol on top of that network library. So that's going to be some fun. That'll be the first, I guess you could say, test net, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is when that foundational code is put together, we'll spin a couple of things up and make sure that we can still exchange messages, basically just like what we did with the P2P bot in the Discord channel, right?
Yeah, anybody that's in Discord can check out dev_P2P channel, and that's actually a monitor of the different nodes on the V2 network. It's not a full node, but it's at least the P2P stack. So the communication layer is up and live and running. And I think there's even documentation floating around if anybody wanted to try their hand at implementing the P2P spec in their own language of choice. But anytime you communicate with it, you'll see whatever the opposite end, I think it's one of your nodes, what it interprets from that message. So if you mess
Correct.
up, it'll let you know. If it actually won't let you know, I think, if you mess up, but if you send something correctly, you'll see it respond, and everything should decode correctly.
And we all know that I'm a big fan of, if you say it incorrectly or you don't do things correctly, I'm better off ignoring you. So that's the way that bot works.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's more secure that way anyway. You don't want to be parsing random data that doesn't fit the schema.
Exactly. God knows what they could get access to into that honeypot.
That's where the secret pre-mine is, man. Don't tell anybody.
Shh, hide it.
So I think if that kind of wraps up the V2 dev status updates, I think we have a guest here that's probably
I got one more. I got one more sneak in that I just remembered that I didn't mention, pre-show, that I do want to sneak in there, right?
All right, let's hear it.
So I've started work in between everything else that's going on at building out the new Ledger application for V2. I've posted in the channels a couple of different places, I think in DevCore, a couple of the previews of the READMEs that are going in the V2 repo that explain how wallets are created, how they're created from seeds, so randomly generated seed bytes, and how the view key is created, how the spend key is created as well. All that information has been kind of posted and shored up. The idea of the sub wallets there, and I've started to frame out that code using the latest Nano or Ledger SDK, because there have been a couple of upgrades since the last code I put together here, and starting to get ready for that as well, because I would love to be able to time this well, where we can try to get V2 into the Ledger Live app, into that environment officially right around the time of launch. So I'm trying to do that at the same time and get planned for that. However, for me to wrap that up, I've got to wrap up the work on the core crypto library for TripTech, which, God willing, I'll get done this week.
If we can get the Ledger Live integration done in time for V2 launch, man, I'd be down to purchase a few ledgers and do like some kind of contest or giveaway or something like that.
Oh, totally. Definitely fill out the seed cards for him beforehand to make it easy for him.
Yeah. that's dirty.
Took you a second there, didn't it?
That's dirty, man.
Yeah, it's funny. We all laugh. And in all honesty, guys, if you're listening in, if you buy a hardware wallet online and it comes with the seed card already filled out, wipe the device, throw out the seed card, and generate your own seeds.
Yep. You've been had.
All right. We can go ahead and move on to our guest that we brought on today.
Yeah, TTC. I've been just calling you by your initials this whole time, but you're actually the admin from TurtleTurtle.club, which is a new pool that's getting quite a bit of attention here in the chat. And I notice you've been putting a lot of work in with regards to helping people out and stuff. And most surprisingly, I heard that you were kind of new at this. So do you mind starting off with just saying hello and telling us a little bit about how you found Turtle?
Hey guys, yeah, it's been kind of a fast journey. I didn't expect to really end up here from where I started. I was mining another coin, and it was boring. I was like, okay, there's got to be something more exciting out there. I went looking, and I just came across TurtleCoin as a good one for the some of the lower end AMD cards I have. And just started hopping through, trying different pools, trying different things out, tried some solo mining. It led me to Crappy's pool, the interestingly named one. And, from there, I started thinking, well, maybe I'll just try running my own pool. Because the solo mining didn't really work. But I thought, let's just see what's going to happen. And it was just going to be a private pool that I was just going to run my workers here on. And, all right. So I started looking at, trying to see how to set up a pool. I think that's around the time I joined Discord too, just to kind of see what, find out more about the community, see if I could find out, what pool software you should be running, what works, what doesn't. There was a lot of older pool software out there from the previous algos, stuff like that. So I'd come across Crappy's GitHub from being on that pool, and tried to get that going. And of course, it wasn't compiling because of some issues with the bad code that had been removed. So I'd switched to another one, found out that was the bad code pool, and we went from there. And Knife Tech had actually posted asking for good pool code, and Crappy posted his or reposted his up on GitHub. Brainbird again.
So had you actually run a pool before?
No, not at all.
Wow, so that's a pretty short path from being a miner to a pool admin. How has the adoption of your pool gone since you've started it up, and what's the experience been like?
Yeah, well, once I had it going up and running, and then I was kind of seeing what was going on with hero miners, and I wanted to kind of try and do something to help. So I decided, okay, why don't I just open it up? Let's make it public. We'll go from there. And it started picking up pretty quickly. So I kind of went, oh, I better do something here and make this a little more scalable. So I moved it up to a data center instead.
That's pretty fancy.
Yeah, just from there, we were just trying to get creative. I tried to kind of give it a nice look as much as I could. I haven't done, even basic CSS or anything in many years, but, I thought I'd give it a try, see what I could do. And, we tried to put a couple things on, like the 10% finder reward. That's a huge hit, so we're just, people are loving that. They seem to be making a bit more overall, over the long term. And, it's a good community. We've got, everybody's helping each other. Which is big too. So
tell us about this Franklin bot.
Well, I found in the code, the Discord notification to kind of announce to the channels, just to say, block found, block orphaned, whatever it is, right? So I set him up, and then I thought, okay, I want to figure out from there what else he can do. I wanted to get worker notifications and stuff on. So, I've started just playing around with the code a little bit, trying to, just figure out how to make him do some more things. Right now, he just kind of talks back a bit. Some of the common things that come up, because he announces the block, everybody talks to him when the block's missing. So we always, so now if somebody says, come on, Franklin, he'll say slow and steady wins the race.
Nice.
Some funny things like that,
So what was your background before this? Are you a technical person? If it's not prying too much,
No, I've been doing IT support and help desk and that kind of stuff for a long time. First in telecom, more so than IT, and now in an MSP. So, I help run an MSP, and we just, it's kind of troubleshooting and helping people with their IT is kind of what I do. So.
Do you work for me by chance?
Well, not that I know of.
Fair enough. Only because I'm laughing because those of you that may or may not have dug into at least my background work a lot in telecom for a large managed service provider. So I never know when I'm going to run into people that work within our organization.
And it wouldn't be the first TurtleCoin developer or service provider that works for you either. No,
not at all. As far as I know, last count, when
so it's a legit question.
Took a look around. I think I'm up to like 5, people within the organization that are hidden throughout the Discord, and then of course there's a couple that are a little more prominent.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny. Small world,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've seen a TurtleCoin sticker on a car before. I've seen people wearing TurtleCoin shirts, but I haven't really had anybody run up to me and be like, you have that soft and buttery smooth patois like that fella Rocksteady. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. I mean, I've been called out for it before, but people tend to follow me a little bit closely, when it comes to organizational stuff and stuff in my professional life, I guess you could say. So they stumble across it. That, and as we've talked about before, I use my government name on everything, so it's not like I'm hiding anything. It stands out like a sore thumb.
So you're saying that you're not the voice actor for Duke from the Bush's Baked Beans commercial?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
So TTC, how much hash rate do you guys have?
Let me take a look. I know we're coming up close to 1 mega, I think. Maybe around 800, but yeah, actually I haven't checked in a while.
So what's the easiest way that somebody can start mining on your pool?
Yeah, well, if you just go to TurtleTurtle.club or pond.TurtleTurtle.club, just garbled my tongue all over that.
More edibles.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been hitting the bong so hard while you guys were talking.
Good old Canada.
Right? But yeah, if you just go to pond.turtleturtle.club, you can hit the getting started page. Our Discord link's there too, so you can just hop in. Any one of us can help get you up and running. We've been learning a lot on all the different GPUs and the different miners and tweaking settings and cards that we were kind of thinking maybe didn't work on Turtle. We've been able to get going. With the help. We've been asking around, talking to developers. Just trying to get all the information and make sure everybody if they have something even remotely able to mine Turtle, we're trying to get it up and running, and it's we've been really successful. So,
that's something that I've been very impressed with. There's not often a pool that comes along, and especially not from a person that hasn't run a pool before, that actually sticks around and puts in the work and helps out users. And I see more often than not that you gain miners because you're in there in the mining channel, putting in work, helping out people, getting them set up mining. And then the inevitable question comes along, hey, what pool should I use? And then you're Johnny on the spot right there. And I think that's great. And I wish that we would see that from more pool owners. In the early days, we used to see a lot more of the service providers that would run pools and wallets and things like that. And in a way, I think some of them maybe have gotten complacent, or as the usage of their pool has kind of declined a little bit, maybe they've stopped showing up in the Discord more or answering support requests, things like that. But I don't know if that's like a chicken or egg situation. So I definitely wanted to recognize that you're in there and being one of the most helpful people in there. So definitely thanks for that. And I hope that more people come to your pool, because you're so close to being on the little pools monitor thing. Whenever you type !pools in the chat, there's like a little graphic for anybody listening that shows a pie chart of how much each pool has hash rate wise. And though Hero Miners is no longer over 50%, it still consolidates a lot of the smaller pools into the same pie slice. And I would really like to see TurtleTurtle.club get its own little slice of the pie on that graphic. Hopefully soon.
Well, taking a look at the current hash rate, it looks like he'll have to get up to about 3 mega hash total to
Dude,
show
you can
up.
do that.
It has to exceed 1%. Yeah,
you can do that.
I know how you can do that for sure. So tell us a bit more about that finder's reward that you mentioned. That kind of intrigued me a little bit.
Yeah, so it's you get 10% of the block if you find or solve the block. So right off the top, so you're getting 2,600-ish, right? And we're finding that it's not just going to the high hashers. We had one, a little CPU hasher that's in Discord. We helped them get up and running. The very next day, they found a block. So they got 2,600-ish plus their, plus their contribution, right? So, and I find for me, like I'm about 40 kilo hash, and about almost every day, I get the reward from one of the blocks. So, it's definitely going around, though. I can see it, a lot of the different miners are getting it. So, it's nice to see it kind of spread out. I wasn't sure if it was just always going to go, kind of to the big hashers, but, it's good to see that the, some of the smaller hashers are getting it too.
I heard the word on the street is the better terms you're on with Franklin, the better your chances are of popping that block yourself.
Oh yeah, it's funny because it just kind of started as a thing because we had I think it was like a 400% or it was something kind of really extreme block, and I tagged him and just kind of said, "Hey Franklin, come on, what's going on, buddy?" And then the block popped out. And then after that, we had a run of about 8 blocks. We actually found there was a block that was like 1 second apart. The effort was a question mark.
Wow.
Wow. I was like, whoa, I don't know what the probability is on that one. But, after chewing through that, kind of 400% effort one, I think we were due. But it was, it's just kind of neat to kind of watch how it kind of works out.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's definitely fun whenever you're coming up on a small pool because it's really a team effort to get the hash rate up there, and everybody's, grabbing their mom's laptop and everything and signing everything up. So I think it's really cool to watch it all coming together. And you guys have really crossed a lot of ground in just a small amount of time. And I hope that a lot more people are enticed over to your pool by the finder's reward. That's a really cool thing that not a lot of pools do.
Yeah, I was trying to, think creative when we saw, when Hero was really bad there and, 78%, I was like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way we can, get people off. And, it's good. And they're learning lots too. And, the questions are getting better and better all the time. And we just keep trying to add to, like the configuration and stuff like that. There's like 3 little gotchas we've learned today about different cards. So we're going to get those up on the website under the getting started. And, we kind of, try and, as the questions come up, we try and get them in the FAQ and stuff like that as well. So
that's really cool that you're building an FAQ. That's going to be really valuable because we're seeing a lot of people, despite that mining is going away here pretty soon, a lot of people are still flooding in wondering, how can I get some TurtleCoin? They may not have access to an exchange, or they may not have a friend who can give them some, or they may not have been around long enough to accumulate some tips. So learning how to mine as quick as possible, people don't realize how accessible it is. And I think folks like you that are out there kind of showing folks, hey, just grab whatever hardware you got. Let's figure out if we can make this work. I think that's really helpful. And another thing I wanted to ask you about, since you're relatively new here, your perspective on things is going to be a little bit different than ours. Bern and I have been around for quite some time, and we tend to see a lot of the same questions and things like that. And after a while, I guess we kind of get blind to some of the questions that are more common. So as a new person, my question is, what are some of the common questions that you're seeing about V2 and about Turtle in general that so far remain unclear, hazy, or not explained at like a basic enough level?
Yeah, well, in the past couple of podcasts, you guys have really done a good job of covering a lot of this stuff. So I think, it's people are figuring it out. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be that group of people that wants to know the value, but beyond that, it's, people are really starting to get excited. I know I am. Like, I want to know as a service operator how that's going to look, and what it's going to mean to be a good candidate, right? What are the things we can do to get ready for that? And with the mining too, a lot of people that were originally going, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll have to switch to another coin. I'm like, well, no, there's still going to be ways to be involved, and there's still going to be ways to kind of earn rewards per se, so, and they're kind of paying attention more and reading more of the V2 FAQ. And yeah, like I said, the questions are getting, more and more complex, I'd say.
And that's definitely something that we appreciate. It's easy to throw out when, moon, and other things like that. But whenever we get the more complex, in-depth questions and pointers to other critical conversations, I think those things are really important to us because it kind of keeps us limber and keeps us moving. What are some of the concerns that you're seeing other new persons like yourself that are kind of common questions that we may not have addressed yet?
How do you guys think TurtleCoin will look in 3 to 5 years?
Well, it'll have a shield.
A turtle-shaped shield.
Blocks. Yeah, exactly. A turtle-shaped shield. We'll have blocks. We'll have transactions. In 3 years, tough call. The goal here is that V2 will be a move that gives us plenty of runway. In my mind, I think I mentioned on the second podcast that we did, Rock, that I'm already starting to put some thought, at least from my perspective, into what the next generation beyond V2 looks like. But I don't know when that timing is going to land. I mean, we kind of talked about that a little bit before, that quantum aspect.
Yeah.
And that time may come in 3 to 5 years. We don't know what that looks like today, but it's possible.
Yeah, that's something that, even though it doesn't seem like it's consumer grade or anything like that yet, it's definitely something to keep in mind, and forewarned is forearmed,
Exactly. So, in 3 to 5 years, we could be looking at V2 and it's rocking on. And who knows, maybe somebody's come along and integrated smart contracts and all the crazy stuff that all the kids are looking for these days. And then shortly behind that, we make the move to quantum resistant, cryptography and, the lattice-based signatures. Who knows? It's hard to tell. All that we can think about today is, what the next 6 months look like and getting through the transition to V2. Beyond that, it's really hard to really think about. I shouldn't say think about, but really plan for any further out. But rest assured, there's going to be other integrations. I talked about last episode, all the different possibilities for ways that people could build staking pools or transaction mining pools. I mean, there's going to be updated integrations. I've got to go through and do an update on TurtlePay. All that type of stuff is going to come into play, and it's going to come in behind, the V2 launch largely, right? So yeah. I imagine that there's going to be quite a few things that are going to be very interesting, and we're hoping with all the additional work that we're doing, reaching out on social media, doing these podcasts, all this reaching out to everybody, letting them know that it gets people excited and it gets them involved, and it's all about that documentation to drive people to want to build something on the network.
So where I kind of see things going a little bit is, not only kind of strengthening up the infrastructure of the network, but also developing some interesting second layer solutions. We're seeing a lot of people asking about, what are some things we can do with regard to high throughput applications or bringing games on the blockchain, things like that. Even people that are asking for things like tokenized assets, NFTs and stuff like that. And it constantly makes me think of Karai and how that could be used in conjunction with TurtleCoin to extend the functionality of the chain itself so that we're not necessarily forced to share a burden of whatever hot game, crypto turtles or whatever. And that way the people who are interested in that type of thing can operate their own side network that is still operating in tandem with the TurtleCoin network, and is enabling them to have a much higher throughput without I don't want to say burdening, but adding extra load to the rest of the network that may not be involved with that. I think that's something that's going to be a key to the network. I kind of tend to embrace the Unix philosophy of do one thing and do that one thing very well. And for TurtleCoin, that's being a transaction network. And like I was saying in the last episode, at the most, all I want to see is just like a little bit of metadata in the transactions, because we really shouldn't be piling on the network with forever data, as I've come to call it.
Yeah, for sure. The lighter we can keep it, the better.
Yeah, pretty much. So during the whole NFT craze and during the whole token craze, a lot of people were asking about well, when are we going to be able to release tokens and ERC20 style assets on the TurtleCoin chain? And it was not really that difficult to put that together in Karai. And I was able to put together a proof of stake balance-based network that was, it took 2 seconds. So I'm interested to see what other people put together. It wasn't something that I delivered into the public domain because that just seemed a little bit careless, but it shouldn't be too difficult to anybody with similar motivations.
Yeah, when you remove the privacy aspects of the technology that we're working with today and in V2, everything gets a lot easier.
Yeah, the clouds suddenly part. TTC, what else do you see people asking?
Apparently my cat has a question. Yes, I just see, so somebody just asked on the Reddit too, not too long ago, in the move from POW to POS in V2, is the system for staking and delegating to staker nodes implemented and tested? In the previous podcast, you guys had mentioned, from what I understood, that too many or too few stakers, staked coins, would knock a node out.
Yeah, so I think what they're talking about there is kind of the lottery system and also the selection process for how we're delegating things. So whenever you think of a traditional proof of stake network, you typically think it's like the biggest person takes all. The person who can stake the most takes all. The person who can accumulate the most currency is going to be the person who could potentially produce all of the blocks. And so we had an interest in not replicating the hero miner situation and creating like a hero staker situation. So it was important to us to remove the biggest and the smallest candidates. Bern, do you want to go into that some?
Sure. So I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. So I'll kind of take it from the top, if you don't mind. But when we start off in the staking process, it's a multi-step stake. So it's important to keep that in mind. The first step of staking is that if you want to operate a candidate node, you're going to have to launch that node. It's going to require that you're going to generate a key pair, a private key and a public key, and announce that public key to the network as basically saying, I'm running for candidacy to take a spot as a producer or a validator. When you announce that, you're going to have to put up some funds to make that announcement. I mean, it's basically just like any other election. You've got to pay something to get into the race, so to speak. After you've done that, that does not give you the ability to produce blocks or validate the blocks. What that does is literally just put you on the ticket, so to speak. People still have to come in and vote for you. And they vote by using their turtle, staking their funds, and basically turning it into a vote on the network that votes for you. One turtle equals one vote. Every time that an election process happens, we take a look at all of the candidates that are currently staked, that users have voted for. We tally up the total votes for each one of those candidates, sort them top to bottom by vote count, and the top and the bottom, like Rocky just said, are thrown out. And again, the reason that we throw out the top is to make sure that we don't have a situation where somebody is always in the running because they threw everything that they had at it. That's not the right way to handle that. We want to distribute this. We want the network to play well together. We want the nodes to do what they're supposed to do. And we also throw out the bottom side. Why throw out the little guy? Well, if we're throwing out the top, it's only fair to throw out the little guy as well. If all he's got is one vote, let's be honest here, he's got one vote. That just messes with the math a little bit.
Well, also that if we acknowledge the single vote candidates, that would really kind of put a burden on the system. Also, it would allow somebody to spam up the low value candidates.
Absolutely, that's the other aspect that I was going to dive into there. In that, to your point, they could just throw those single votes out there. They could throw all their candidates out there. They could create hundreds of them if they wanted to. And then we run into a Sybil situation, right? With just one stake or one vote behind them. We don't want that either. So, when it goes through the election process, one of the first things that it does, and a lot of this stuff is actually outlined in the V2 overview article as well, but it actually runs down through that list and it takes a look at all of the hashes for the blocks in the last round that completed. And it rolls those up in essence into a Merkle hash that is used to compute a cut line. Just like if you went to the casino, and hopefully all of you guys are old enough to know what a casino is and how this works. It's like having a deck of cards and then cutting it somewhere in the middle. We use that Merkle hash to cut that list of candidates and all of their votes at that point. And depending on where you're at, in that vote count, so to speak, it's going to take and it's going to drive that process on whether or not it's figuring out whether or not you're a staker or a validator for that round. But again, it's just turning you into a candidate producer or validator for that particular round that's upcoming. We actually take some of that same information, we apply some drive functions and things like that to generate a method for us to roll through using fun modus-based math, right, or modulus-based math, to roll over then the possible candidates in the producers and the validators to ultimately arrive at, the number of elected candidates for that particular round. Those that are elected into the producer group are the ones that will be able to produce blocks that round. Those that are elected into the validators group, as you can imagine, those are the ones that will be able to validate blocks that round.
That makes sense. I mean, it sounds really complex and everything, but at the end of the day, it's really to ensure the most fair system for everybody.
Exactly. And the key there is seeding that random selection or that pseudo random selection with the prior block data. That's the important thing. And we needed to set it up in such a way that it was entirely deterministic, so it could be easily reproducible by all of the nodes that are on the network. You could always follow along and see exactly how it would play out, exactly how the election should be, so we can tell who should be producing blocks when and who should be validating blocks.
That's a good way of putting it. And I think what this will bring the value to a lot of the smaller folks out there, I should rephrase that. I think the value that this will bring to a lot of the smaller miners out there with concerns that their power isn't enough, that they could probably run this on pretty low power hardware. It's not going to require like a huge rig or any type of significant investment. Your only concern really is just reliable uptime and good latency. So you just need good internet and constant power to your machine.
And to add to that, a beautiful thing that we are going through, I should say that I am going to plan on going through and testing here, is that because of the way that the election process works, the way that the nodes work at the end of the day, you should be able to run the node soft run multiple machines, multiple geographic places, and use that same key set. So even if one of them failed, so to speak, there's another one that can pick up that load, and still take and perform the work that you're required to do if you're running as a candidate and you get elected. Because the last thing that you want to do is be elected and then not fulfill your duties. Because what happens when you don't fulfill your duties, Rock?
Blood for the blood god.
Blood for the blood god.
No, that's all really great, because that's the kind of stuff I'm looking at, and especially being in the data center I'm in, right, being in the cloud, I can very easily replicate and load balance, and there's some extra stuff I can set up to make sure that there's coverage there.
Oh, 100%. That was pretty much my greatest fear in kind of putting this together, is that I'm the same way. I like setting up multiple instances. If you've looked at any of the work I've done, largely on a lot of the JavaScript and TypeScript packages, very microservice oriented. And to Brock's point earlier, the Unix minds that do one thing and do it very well. That's what I like to strive for in some regards. But I also like to be able to set up high availability stuff and keep things rolling. So that way, if something does happen, I didn't just have half of my coins slashed, or whatever that works out to in the end. Having that resiliency there, knowing that I can run it multiple places, obviously not all in the same data center, that's going to make it a lot easier for people to do it. And as Rock said, it's not going to take a lot of resources to do this. I mean, a lot of the technology that we're playing with here, the bulletproofs are relatively easy to verify, even on a reasonably, new machine, so to speak, something the last couple, 5-6 years.
An Amiga is not going to do it.
An Amiga is going to struggle. I'm not going to say it's not going to do it. It's definitely going to struggle. And even the signatures, the triptych signatures, it's relatively easy lift. Validating the proof of work, for the transactions, again, easy lift. It's pretty straightforward. So, you will be able to run a node on a Raspberry Pi.
That was my next question.
Issues. Typically without issues. It may not be the fastest thing in the world, but it will certainly work. It'll be able to pull it off. The storage will be there. Might have to hook up some external storage, but the power is certainly there.
That's pretty cool. I know that's going to be music to a lot of people's ears, because there are a lot of people out there that are like, hey, I got this Raspberry Pi. I'm going to start mining. You better hide your coins.
Best of luck to you, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the Android miners. So.
Yeah, put it in the freezer.
Yeah, and could you technically run a node on a cell phone? Probably, as long as you get the storage for it and you get a solid connection there. I mean, again, it's not super heavy. It's not like mining, right? That's the important thing to understand, that while we're getting rid of mining for the verification and of transactions and the creation of blocks, right? What we're replacing it with is very friendly, to run on practically any hardware. The real thing that you need to be able to pull this off is honestly just the turtle to stake, whether it's a candidate or his votes, and it's important to remember, even if you can't run a candidate node, you don't have access to a data center, you don't have reliable internet access, you're in the middle of the desert, or as Rock said earlier, you're in the middle of the forest, up in the mountains, it doesn't matter. You can still participate, you can still earn staking rewards just by casting your votes using your turtle for your favorite candidate nodes.
So I'm looking back at the thread TTC. I don't know if you're looking, but we're getting quite a bit of engagement there. Let's see. We got Master Pirate, who actually says, mining with new hardware. What's the current timeline of projects for Turtle? Where can other developers look to find out more about Turtle, such that the toxic individuals don't just throw garbage at individuals who want to be a part of the community? Will you be working with any other tokens or coins to pair with? Can you let us know about the usage rights to the logo and or its derivatives? Can any one person apply to help with designing, helping with design? Huh. Okay.
Well, let's unpack that real quick, right? Let's start from the bottom here. Can anybody help with the design? Sure, hop into the Discord, have a conversation in the marketing channel.
The place to go to for that is github.com/TurtleCoin/brand. And that will have our brand guide for 2020 and 2021. And that should have all the assets that you need. Please do take care to spell it correctly, capital T, capital C, all one word. And I think that should remove a lot of the toxic individuals. If you're looking with regards to development, hop in the chat and just tell us what language that you're most comfortable in and what you want to work on. And we have so many repos and projects and things like that. There's definitely something that you can get your hands into. And though your work right now won't be as relevant in the context of V2, it'll give you the skills and the tools and the familiarity and the rapport that you need, so that whenever V2 rolls around, you'll be able to transfer that knowledge fairly readily. And hopefully people will recognize you for your efforts. So I think we have another question there. Yayo, let's go. Some questions that I find interesting. What are the biggest issues y'all see in other crypto projects? Do you have a specific use case in mind for TurtleCoin, or are y'all just doing what you think would make the perfect crypto and let people figure out what to use it for? What was the biggest mistake y'all have made so far in developing TurtleCoin? On the flip side, what is something y'all are proud of yourselves? What is something y'all have done well? ELI5 TurtleCoin. That's kind of low effort. Y'all keep saying you don't make decisions based on the value of currency, but what if it would go down to zero? What if nobody would use TurtleCoin anymore, and that for a prolonged period? Not few $100 trading volume day, but legit zero. Not a nothing. What would you do? Do y'all think there will ever be a V3? You don't have to answer all or any, but I'll personally would find answers to those questions interesting. Yeah, those are some good questions. And, with respect to the price questions, it's still a legit question, I guess. So he says, what are the biggest issues y'all see in other crypto projects? A big issue that I see in other crypto projects is doing too much moon chasing, too much chasing the next opportunity, the next listing, the next whatever social fanfare that they can get, and they don't spend enough time developing their code and handling the load for once those people arrive. So the great thing about crypto and promotions and things like that is that it's relatively easy to pull in people, but it's not easy to pull in people that are going to be savvy users that are going to benefit the project in a positive way and not just leave as soon as the price goes whichever direction is the direction that takes them out. So how will TurtleCoin look in 3 to 5 years? I think we answered that one.
Yep.
Do you have a specific use case in mind for TurtleCoin? I think we kind of covered that in the transactional nature of TurtleCoin discussion and the whole Unix philosophy thing. But the interesting question that I kind of want to get to is what's the biggest mistake and what's the things that we're proud of and what is something that we've done well? Bern, do you want to take that?
Oh man, that's a loaded question because I actually think we touched a little bit on this in the first
About the forking discussion?
Well, the whole yeah. We'll circle back to that there, but yeah, I think we dug into this quite a bit as a result of the stories when we were talking through the first episode with MetaPrimer, right? But some of the biggest problems that I think that we ran into, or some of the biggest mistakes, largely was that fork. Asking people to fork the code base, play with the code base, and then ultimately, hopefully, submit some pull requests back, to contribute back to the project. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They forked it, they created shitcoins, they split the community off a little bit, and eventually, quite a few of them went and pulled the rug, and that just wasn't good for us. That's probably the dark time or the darkest times in my mind. Beyond that, some of the other mistakes, stress testing the network in ways that we didn't really foresee it doing, but we learned a lot in the process. So
I used to send mix in 1,000 transactions and it would just drop the network.
I mean, if I really want to think about the biggest mistake, though, personally speaking, I think it was our fork to Chukwa, Chukwa V1, where the plan was to reset the difficulty and let it sort itself out. And ultimately, what I think we made it 6 blocks past the fork height or the upgrade height, right before the chain died.
Yeah, it seriously died. I think we didn't have a transaction for 30 minutes.
No, if I remember correctly, the difficulty dropped to 0. Which, if you've ever played with the code base or taken a look at a lot of the crypto networks out there, if difficulty drops to 0, it is impossible to mine a block anymore.
Can't divide by 0.
Can't divide by 0, exactly. So what we had to do quick was say, well, that was a nice thought, and quick patch, the software for the release, have the pools get that running, rewind a couple of blocks, and just redo that upgrade height. That was probably my biggest personal mistake. That, man, I swear to God, I tested it on test nets and toyed around with it, and it went smoothly. But here's one of those things where it works great in the lab, but in production, we should know better.
That was the one time where having such a centralized pool structure really, really worked in our favor.
Yeah, thank God for, I think it was Mind Together that saved us, Disco Tim, that time, because if it wasn't for him pulling that patch quick, it could have been an ugly evening.
Yeah, it could have been really bad. I remember having a really sweaty mustache over that whole situation.
Yeah, I felt like an ass.
So, on the flip side, what's something that y'all are proud of yourselves and what's something that you've done well?
What am I proud of myself for? Man, a lot of different things. But
you know what I'm proud of?
Ego stroking. Yeah, go for it.
I'm proud of getting rid of exile or not sending people to exile as often now. I'm proud of coming back with trade discussion in the chat and how the reason why I say that is, even though I'm not a trader, I feel that it kind of hurt the community a little bit for me to be so hard on the people about trade discussion in the chat. And in the beginning, though, it had noble intentions of just keeping everything above board. I think it did kind of hurt the process of discourse in the chat. And so the thing that I'm proud of is that we're able to, or at least I'm able to, acknowledge the faults that I made, and we were able to begin the process of undoing those wrongs. And through that has led a lot less people into exile. And now, I don't know if people have even noticed, we have like whereas exile, whenever somebody was acting up on the server, it would send them to this room called exile, and everybody in the server can see exile, but the person who is exiled can only see that channel, or they can only participate in that channel. And in the beginning, we had a few people go there. A few people spend months, years, whatever, days, hours, and we would give them simple challenges like do some turtle origami or sing karaoke with us or something that would endear them to the community, and then we'd let them out. And every year we would let everybody out. We have an amnesty day on December 9th, and we still, to this day, unban all this, even the spam bots. We unban everybody on December 9th. And so I think that it's kind of a important thing that we talk about Castaway Island. So whereas Exile made it to where
Castaway Island.
Yeah. So whereas Exile made it to where you could only participate in that one channel, Castaway Island makes it to where you see an identical general chat, and you can still speak in all of the other chats, all the other rooms unimpeded, just fine. But you see a special general chat that is just you and the Rancor and a few other people that are on the island with you, and of course your friend Wilson. And so that's it. It's very effective. People don't even know that they weren't presentable for the main face of the chat, and everybody still gets to get their point across. They still get to go to the trader chat, and everything seems to work out well. And only the ones that were there with pretty bad intentions seem to stick around in Castaway Island. So it's working out pretty well, and hopefully someday we can get rid of that too.
Fair enough. And I'll echo that, as much as it probably grinds my gears, talking about value and stuff like that, bringing the traders back has been interesting, because it does give us a perspective that, I don't know that we were as acutely aware of, because I never made it into the former Marco Talk servers, because every time that I did, they ran me off. But, it's one of those things that it shows a perspective, and there are certain people that do come here just for that aspect, right? And we do get a chance to talk to them. And it's surprising how many people that when you get to talking to them a little bit, and get past that one moon, so to speak, that they're not that bad, that they have some interesting stories there. They have some interesting perspective. You can actually have a conversation back and forth. So in that regard, I guess I'm kind of happy for that as well.
Yeah. So his next question is, y'all keep saying you don't make decisions based on the value of the currency, but what if it would go down to zero? What if nobody would use TurtleCoin anymore, and that for a prolonged period? Not few $100 trading volume days, but legit zero. What would you do? Well, so here's the deal. TurtleCoin started out with the value of zero. For the longest time, it had the value of zero. Even after it spiked and then went all the way down to something like $5 or $6 per million, it effectively had a value of zero. And there were days where it was like 6 Satoshi or something like insanely low. And it was very easy to not see an end in sight. And the great thing about the way, one thing that I think we've done well is we've never used the price to motivate the things that we do. We understand that there will be good times and there will be bad times. And without the bad times, the good times aren't so good. And the relationships that we make with the people that come by and still work with us despite the value being low are the lasting relationships that we end up taking with us into V2, V3, and everything in the future. And I think every time that we make one of these bonds, one of these lasting relationships, it adds to the team. And more often than not, people who stick around and don't even have intentions of being a programmer end up learning things here, end up learning life skills. We've seen people get jobs. We've seen people, learn entirely new fields of discipline. And I think it's really important to recognize those people that are around whenever the value is presumably pretty low. So if it went down to zero, yeah, it would hurt, but it would be more like an ego hurt. But we'd still be doing the same thing that we're doing now. And if it truly went down to zero and people weren't trading it for days, that would probably be an extreme warning sign that something has gone wrong with the financial system. So I can't say that it's likely, but I can say with great certainty that we'll just keep on keeping on doing what we do now. So with regard to that, I think...
Let me echo that with the thought that, how many times, over the last 3 years did we go through and we make a couple of changes here and there to tweak things, hopefully make things better, where the end result was us saying YOLO in the merge commit, right? Because what the hell difference does it make, right? Only when you've lost everything are you free to do anything.
Ooh, good old Tyler Durden.
So to Rock's point, if it dropped completely to zero, I'm still going to keep on keeping on because that means I get to play with more toys.
Yep, pretty much. So I think that pretty much covers all the questions that we've got so far in that thread. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, and one guy says, when rebranding to Cucumber Token? Oh, wait, no, here we go. Zero Fuck says, break down the staking rewards if you haven't, please. I'm at work, gonna tune in later. Is there a transactional economy in addition to staking rewards? Like if the coin becomes adopted to pay for things and there are 1,000 transactions in that block, all paying a fee, do stakers get part of that as a reward?
All right, let me pull it up here real quick. Because believe it or not, I don't even have this stuff memorized sometimes. I got to look back at the articles that I've previously written in my notes to make sure that I'm explaining it correctly.
It's a lot to keep in RAM, I'm not going to lie.
So to put it simply, each block reward, like we've talked about before, is composed of not only the transaction fees, so the aggregate transaction fees in a block, just like what we have today, and like many cryptocurrency projects have, but of course also the match of those transaction fees as new coins will be emitted each block. Now, the way that we've currently got it set out to carve up that block reward between all the parties that are involved is that 20% of that total block reward will go to the producer of the block, 20% to one of the validators in that particular round, 30% to the users who staked that producer that produced the block, with a maximum of 10 randomly selected stakers, as well as 30%, or the remaining 30%, I should say, to the users who staked the validator that was selected as the validator to be paid with that block. So in all, it gets split 4 ways. Or through 4 different groups, I should say, but it actually gets split among 22, hopefully, independent parties.
So TTC, that kind of sounds a little bit like your finder's reward almost.
Yeah, it does, and definitely has me interested. I know, that at least the community of miners we have in the clubhouse, that they're all really going to like that for sure.
So as we're going through these explanations and things like that, are there any questions that are coming to your mind or any concerns or anything like that?
Well, I do see there was another one here. They're asking, this is Axadex. I'm curious to know, in your opinion, what does Turtle stand out with compared to other cryptocurrencies in the market? For example, Nano or Monero achieve a similar purpose, with Monero being private, and Nano having extremely low transaction fees. Where does Turtle fit in filling a niche besides being notorious? I think before you guys answer that, I'll just say, I know for me, the biggest thing that kind of drew me in was, getting involved in the community. It's definitely unique. And it's, my kind of people. So, I know you guys can probably speak a bit more about as far as, some of the privacy features and things that are coming up in V2 that'll, be unique and different to some of the other coins out there.
Yeah, so the way that things are going to work is we're going to get it. Whenever you compare it to Nano, we have a similar type of deal going on. They also have transaction proof of work, but they're currently well, not currently, but recently suffered a little bit from either that transaction proof of work delta being driven up by malicious actors, or a large amount of spam entering the chain because of the feeless nature of it. And I think that we're kind of striking a good middle ground here by having not only the transactional proof of work, but also the fee in place, so that things like spam attacks are going to be a little bit less appealing for somebody that wants to make their point. Maybe they'll find a different way. So what makes that unique is that we're bringing privacy to that equation. So we're talking about whenever they talk about how do we compare to Monero. Monero, they do great jobs, and they're really doing a lot of great research and things like that. We're in a fortunate position where we're relaunching the chain, and I don't think that that's something that they've maybe considered yet. So that affords us the ability to make some different decisions with regards to how our blocks are structured, how data is pruned, how anonymous things are, or how private things are whenever you're conducting yourself in transactions. So a big difference there would be a difference in the size of the anonymity pool, which is the amount of parties that your coins are mingling with whenever a transaction happens. So inherent to the protocol is like a little function where the coins are not only anonymized as far as the way that they're labeled, but they're mixed around a little bit, and it's not really important how it happens, but it makes it to where somebody can't just take your address. Like, let's say you go and you buy a hot dog with TurtleCoin and you scan the little barcode with your phone, you make the payment, and if it were Bitcoin, somebody could just look up your address or look up that transaction and see who's paying you, where you're spending your money, how much money you have in your wallet. And that could be a bad situation depending on how much money you have and where you're trying to spend it. So we don't make any assumptions that people will be okay with that. So having that good mixture of very low fees, very fast transactions, very low energy consumption on the chain, very low barriers to entry. I think that TurtleCoin is very much poised to be the first point of entry for people that want a little bit more. We're starting to see Bitcoin blocks that are being touted as like the first fully validated Bitcoin blocks, where Goldman Sachs and different banking institutions and financial regulators are saying, okay, these are the ordained transactions that are in this block. And, very, very soon we may see Bitcoin be a permissioned blockchain where only certain people can transact on the network. And we're starting to see the closing of the gates for people that are looking for a way to take their Bitcoin off the network, maybe trade it for USD or something like that, and they're no longer enabled to do that. So there's going to become a time where these privacy chains and privacy networks are going to become very useful, and just in the means of protecting yourself, because you just don't need to be sharing with the guy that you buy a hot dog from how much money you have. That's just a risk that's just ridiculous. Even in traditional banking now, somebody can't just send you some money and know exactly how much is in your account. So I think that's a reasonable thing that a lot of networks are not really focusing on. And the ones that are focusing on it, some are doing it in ways that aren't really practical, like optional privacy and things like that with Zcash. If you have optional privacy, you don't have privacy, because then it's a reasonable assumption that anybody that needs that privacy is doing it for a reason. They're probably doing something bad, a lot of people say. So whenever every transaction, regardless, is the same level of private and a high level of private and also easy to access, I think that TurtleCoin is going to become a new standard in the first point of entry for people that need a little bit more. I hope this answers that, and I hope you guys didn't fall asleep in the middle of that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, one of the things, and I have to apologize because I did nod off for a quick second, but I followed you 100% when it got to the end.
Just checking your eyelids for holes, huh?
Yeah, checking my eyelids for holes. Good news, there's none. The other thing that I like to think about when I think about V2 and the approach that we're taking, like Rock said, starting everything from scratch and being able to enable large mixing rings at the start, right? a lot of networks, including ourselves, as we've kind of progressed through things and worked our way through different upgrades to the network, to the consensus protocols, to the way that the mixing operates or signature schemes along the way, you carry all that old transactional data with you. You still have to support those older signature methods, all that stuff there. And in some ways, I've even heard those older transactions or those older mix-ins or those older outputs that you mix with referred to as tainted, outputs that you could mix with, because it reveals something about the transaction, right? That it is spending funds that haven't been touched in 5 years, right? That's one of the things that is often overlooked as you kind of go through those upgrade processes, that you got to keep carrying that along and you got to keep supporting that. You can't draw a hard line in the sand, because then you don't know how much of your user base you're cutting the legs off on. Doing it from the start, we know that we're starting all at the same place, that the features are there. It's a high mixing level, and there's no such thing, going into it of tainted funds, right?
And that's the essence of fungibility. A lot of people say, we're fungible, but what they don't realize is fungible means if you can tell one coin from another, it's not fungible. If things aren't, identical, then it's not fungible. And fungibility matters, just like we're seeing now with Bitcoin, and with them saying that certain inputs, certain people are not permitted to transact on the network. And that's just not the vision whenever Bitcoin was created. That was not the point of it. And I think it's kind of sad to see things going in this path, but hopefully TurtleCoin can right some of those wrongs, or at least lead the community in a different direction.
Or die trying.
Yeah, we can really tell you guys really put this through. Like, you guys, you really put a lot of time and effort into this, and it really shows. Like, you guys have, thought through a lot of possibilities, a lot of different options. And I mean, I know it's always changing, and I know you got to stay on top of it, but it's definitely noticeable.
A lot of this comes from being in the community for a long time. A lot of us have been around since the beginning of Bitcoin, and it's amazing to see things evolve and solidify into these legacy services. We now have things like Coinbase. Who would have ever thought that things like that would happen? But I think with that, there's been some trade-offs with the greater community injecting themselves into the cryptosphere, and there's things, uncomfortable changes that are happening. And I think that the pace at which these new actors are injecting their ideas into the network is kind of outpacing the rational thought as to what are we doing here. We've got this great system here that's permissionless, that's allowing people that may live in countries where it may cost them their life to transact in certain ways. They may not have the same rights that we have with regards to free speech, equality, and things like that. And whenever you start drawing little lines around who can transact on a permissionless network, it's no longer permissionless. You have to do things in certain ways to make sure that you're not going to be penalized for who you decide to transact with, or who you decide to support, who you decide to buy things from. So if going to the wrong, the place for lunch is going to get me in trouble later, then what's the point? It's kind of like with PayPal. You can't buy anything in certain categories. Like if you want to get like vape juice or something like that, PayPal has been known to reject your transaction. If you want to transact with Coinbase, then certain banks in the U.S. don't want to do business with you. And if you have any affiliation at all with blockchain projects, they don't want to have anything to do with you. And that's a terrible way to live, to be depersoned that way and to be disowned by the greater systems that the public depends on.
Thank you for that TED Talk.
Yeah, well, I think that pretty much covers everything. Is there anything that you guys want to interject in there?
Mega Millions is up to, I think, 468 million when I was at the gas station earlier. So, again, I'm asking for winning numbers.
420.
Sure. I'm okay with taking the tax hit on this one. I'll share it.
Hey, TTC, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And for any of you other guys out there that operate services or do things and are maybe new to the community, it would be a great opportunity to have you guys on the podcast. So feel free to let us know. TTC, thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Very
All
cool.
right, guys.
We appreciate it. Till next time.
Till next time, this concludes this meeting at the Midnight Society. Everybody be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/TurtleCoin. Very soon, we're going to be in a podcast app near you, so be sure to keep searching for TurtleCoin. We're actively trying to submit our feed. So the rest of you, thank you very much. Join us in Discord at discord.gg/TurtleCoin, and we'll see you guys next time.